Welcome, Intro to Communication students. This is part 2 of Introduction to the Field of Communication. This PowerPoint will be about the types of messages that you see in our everyday communication. Let's forge ahead. Remember that we're always thinking about the two primary questions in this class, and that is, what kind of communication are we making? Communication is something that we make it ourselves, we make it with other people, and you can always ask yourself, what are we making right now? The second question that you'll ask yourself all the time if you're going to be an effective communicator is, how are we making this communication? Is it the best way to make the communication? Now, you could refer to this screencast if you wanted. Is this the best way for me to get my message across to you? But remember these two primary questions. Again, we'll come back to them all semester. You should be thinking about them in your daily lives as well. What are we making and how are we making it? Really, what we're going to cover is the 6 types of messages in this PowerPoint, and we'll get into those right away. And as we get through this screencast, remember the 2 tips. Number 1, take notes. And number 2, tweet using the hashtag for the class. Also, feel free to tweet at Prof. Maddie, hashtag LC Sharks, and at Landmark College. So let's crank up the tweets, try to get 3 out as we do this. Hopefully you hear something that resonates with you that you want to make into a tweet. 6 kinds of messages that we're going to talk about. All messages are either verbal or nonverbal. And verbal means that they come out of your mouth, you form words, you speak words, and those all fall under verbal messages. Any sort of words that you form fall under verbal. All other messages that do not involve words fall in the nonverbal category. And when we get to the chapter on nonverbal communication, we'll get into much more detail about the 7 areas of study within nonverbal communication. But anything that does not involve the human forming words falls in the nonverbal category. Feedback messages. We're going to cover that in its own slide, and we'll go over that. Feed forward messages. Phatic messages is something we'll cover in great detail, and you'll learn what a phatic message is today. And then meta message. These last 2, both phatic and meta messages, are really where I'm going to ask you to apply and think about your own communication as we get towards the end of the screencast and you have a short writing assignment. So phatic and meta messages are probably going to be relatively new to you, and they're vitally important to successful communication. So let's go. Feedback messages, what are they? You can see from this picture, we're getting some feedback. You could put this into negative or positive. What do you think? Probably some people are not happy in this picture. Feedback is the message or messages that you get back from the audience, from the receiver. These messages can be either good or not good. You know, I think about my teaching all the time, and as I'm talking to the class, I'm looking for feedback from students. They're not telling me the feedback. It may not be spoken, but I can sense negative or positive feedback as I'm lecturing, and that's what good communicators do, is they really sense what is the feedback happening. Remember, feedback can be verbal or nonverbal as well. So looking at the face and the body, those things can really indicate what the person is giving the speaker back for messages. Feedback can also be person-focused or message-focused. Feedback that's person-focused is about the person, maybe specifically about their personality, their temperament, what they look like. Message focused would be about the content, the message, how the message came across. Are you too loud? Is it clear? Is the message clear? What are we making? How are we making it? Those are message and communication focused. So you can think about those two types of feedback. Feedback can be immediate or delayed. In the classroom, it's immediate. I see you, you see me, and I can tell what's going on. I get some sense of feedback from you. My course evaluations from the summer that I just got a couple of weeks ago, that came several weeks after the course ended, that would be delayed. So feedback can be immediate or delayed, and sometimes the listener has the choice when to give feedback. You always have choices in your communication. Do I want to give feedback now? Should I wait and pull back and do it later? And you're thinking about that. Feedback can be low or high monitored. This was a quiz question that we had. Low monitored feedback means that I express my feelings and feedback right on my face in an immediate way. I don't censor what I'm feeling, and I let the speaker know. High monitored feedback means I keep a poker face. I don't let you know. I am stoic. I don't let you know what I'm thinking. Feedback can be supportive or critical. You know, when I think of supportive, I think of feedback being celebration. Let's celebrate. What's your accomplishment? And critical, let's get a little more specific on what you need to improve. So in our feedback on our posts, when you give feedback to your peers, I want you to see it as a celebration of what your peers are writing. Feed forward messages. Feed forward messages are messages that open up the channels before you send the primary message. It happens before you send the primary message. And it previews what's about to come. I've got big news to tell you. Really good news. Or I have horrible news to tell you. Please sit down. It's saying to the listener what's about to happen. And there are many, many types of feed forward messages out there. Caller ID, cover of a book, my agenda on the board, the first slide in this PowerPoint. It's previewing what we're going to cover. And those are all nonverbal, actually, feed forward messages. But feed forward messages also define roles. Dearest student of mine, can I see you after class to discuss your grade? That would be a preview message, and it's defining roles. It's really setting the stage for good communication. What's about to happen, rather than just drop the bomb on the student. Disclaimer to message. It really, again, it sort of sets the stage. The disclaimer means that it's a preview of what's about to happen. I am going to talk to you about your grade after class. So now you can start to think, okay, I can prepare myself for that message. Good interactions and conversations always use feed forward. Preview your message before you go. Next, let's talk about phatic communication. Apparently, I didn't use bullets on the fly, so I'm just going to talk about this slide. I'll use the cursor. Phatic messages are opening lines or small talk. And Erving Goffman said phatic communication is the social lubricant to establishing connection and warming up a conversation. So you can think about what opening lines do you use, and I'll give you some examples in a second. Phatic messages communicate an attitude, not ideas. And so we're warming up to break the ice and get to know someone in phatic messages. And they also, another piece to phatic messages is they don't mean literally what they are saying. So when I say something like, "What's up?" we don't really mean what's up. People aren't going to look up and see what's up. Although if you want to be literal, people will look up and go, oh, I don't know, the sky? And so they don't literally mean what they say. And that's an important part of emphatic messages as well, is that they can be messages that are indirect and are saying something else, but we're warming up into a conversation. And cliches fit into this, just as the example I just used, what's up, that's a cliche. So emphatic messages, you can think about the opening lines you use, how you use them, and here's some examples. How are you? Maybe that is, maybe that isn't, but really that's an opening line. I used this one already. What's up? Hey, how's it going? It's going. So we're not really asking how it's going. We're really trying to warm into a conversation about life, about relationships, about opening the doors to gateways to other possibilities. And that's the thing with emphatic messages, is that people think they're not important. They don't really do anything. However, they open up the idea of endless possibilities with your messages, because you don't know where you're going to go. Here's some other examples. Fine weather today. I like this one down here, the last bullet. Are you going to eat that? Am I really asking are you going to eat that, or am I really saying something else? And Maddie, will you be grading this assignment this afternoon? What's the student really saying there? And so maybe they're getting into a conversation about when I'm going to grade it. Emphatic messages, indirect messages, warm up the conversation, open up possibilities of where the conversation can go or not go. That's the other thing you realize about emphatic messages, is that sometimes they can die on the vine right there and make for what is an uncomfortable moment. Moving on, meta messages. What are meta messages? Meta messages are specific verbal messages that reflect on the communication actor episode. So this is message-focused messages. They focus on the act or the communication episode. They check in on the moment. Hey, how are you feeling right now? Are you getting along okay in this screencast? They check in on emotions. They check in on anything about the process of that communication act. Generally, again, these are relational messages. They're not content messages. They're really about checking in on the other person, their state of mind. Are they understanding the message? These are great messages to show listening. I might say something like, you seem really bothered by this, or you seem really happy about this. And so, again, if I'm not talking about the content necessarily, I'm reflecting on what I see in the act of the communication. And really, these are critical messages to successful relationships, and possibly, and some scholars argue, that meta messages are more important than content messages, because we're focusing on healthy acts of communication. And again, we can go back to, what are we making? How are we making it? When you're thinking about these two questions, you are really thinking about meta messages. Here's some examples of meta messages. How we doing? I have something funny to tell you. There's no real content there. It's really just prepping the message. You seem bored. Do you understand? You seem confused. These are all reflections on the act of communication. That makes me happy. Let's recap messages. We went over the 6 types of messages, 2 primary questions that we look at all semester. How did you do with taking notes and tweeting today? Did you get out 3 tweets? And did you use these other hashtags? Further questions. Now you can go to your blog and you can think about these questions. What are your go-to opening lines, your emphatic messages, and can you come up with some new ones? Describe who you are when you meet new people. Think about this. Do you have anxiety, and what do you look like when you first meet someone new? Next question to think about. How well do you use meta messages? Assess your ability to use meta messages. Do you understand them? And you can think about that. We really need to use meta messages this semester and practice them. Last question, I always say, students, can you create a question from the lecture? And I gave you some. I'll always end my screencasts on lecture to learning, which is create a potential essay question and maybe create a visual, and also write a 1-paragraph summary of this lecture to make sure that you are able to synthesize and summarize. Well done. We're done. The screencast, that was about 15 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this lecture on the different types of messages that you see in the world.